Former New York Governor George Pataki has absolutely no chance at being president. Now, you might think I'm being hyperbolic, but consider this. Normally, I would start one of these videos by pointing out how badly one of the candidates is doing in the Real Clear Politics average. But George Pataki is polling so low that he isn't even included. That means that George Pataki is polling about as well as I am for the Republican nomination. He's also polling about as well as you, the late writer and raconteur Quentin Crisp, and a damp sock. Finally, to make matters worse, that isn't even George Pataki. This is George Pataki, but you couldn't tell the difference because nobody knows who the hell George Pataki is. This is why George Pataki will never be president. Howdy gang, my name's Chandler Dean, and this is why George Pataki will never be president. Now you might be wondering why I'm going for such a boring candidate so early on in the series, and I'd say it's a lot like eating a salad before dinner. If I eat a Trump roast and a Bernie sandwich before I get to any of the boring stuff, I'll be done too fast. By the way, ingredients for a Bernie sandwich: spend $10 trillion on sandwiches, then divide equally among 300 million people. Ingredients for a Trump roast, meanwhile, just say, it'll be great, trust me. Point is, we're stuck with Pataki this week. George Pataki was elected governor of New York in 1994, narrowly defeating incumbent governor Mario Cuomo. Many people, including Pataki himself, attribute his victory to a last-minute endorsement from Howard Stern, which would make George Pataki the first president to ride the Sybian all the way to the White House. He was then re-elected twice before leaving office over 8 years ago, and since then, he's joined a law firm, he started a non-profit organization, hung around the UN. Basically, he's done nothing of note. Essentially, he took a gap year, except it lasted 8 years, and George Pataki is a former governor, not an introspective pot-smoking 18-year-old who needs to figure some shit out before taking on the huge responsibilities of freshman year at a liberal arts college. There was speculation that George Pataki would run for Senate in 2010. He didn't. Then there was speculation he would run for president in 2012. He didn't. Instead, he waited for there to be 16 other candidates in the race and thought, maybe now I'll stand out. And, in a way, he's doing so remarkably bad that he kind of is standing out. Were you wondering why the most recent Republican debate featured 11 candidates on one stage and 4 candidates on the other? Here's what happened. Fox News hosted the first Republican debate, and at the time there were 17 candidates running for the Republican nomination. So Fox News said, screw it, we're not going to be able to afford the stadium it would take to fit all these candidates on one stage, we're having 2 debates. So they put the top 10 candidates on one stage and the remainder on the other. Of those 7 candidates in the loser debate, Carly Fiorina killed it. She started surging in the polls, so got to be bumped up to the top debate. Then, Rick Perry remembered that you need money to run for president and exited stage left. Finally, CNN was able to determine that Jim Gilmore doesn't really exist. So, we were left with 3 pathetic white men and 1 incredibly pathetic white man on the loser debate this time. So, ironically, this meant that each candidate actually had more time to get their message out, albeit at a time when most people are still enjoying tapas. So, perhaps George Pataki was able to get his message out. Let's find out in a segment I like to call George Pataki Debate Highlights.
Hi, I'm George Pataki.
This has been George Pataki Debate Highlights. Overall, George Pataki's dead in the water. He's probably the least likely New York governor to become president right now, which is crazy considering the other ones are Andrew Cuomo, corrupt, David Paterson, blind, and Eliot Spitzer, who of course is bald. Finally, think about the fact that I've talked about so many other politicians in this video other than George Pataki. That means that George Pataki is so boring that he can't even be the center of attention in a video about him. And that is why George Pataki will never be president. Hey, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to Chandler Dean videos for even more fun shenanigans, and also follow me on the social media at Chandler J. Dean. Much appreciated.